Hello and welcome. Once more, it is Worldbuilding Wednesday. And so, well, of course, we will world build as soon as I make sure everything is working. Very good. Okay, so let us get to world building. Here we are. So last time we ran the game, our characters made it, well, the character we follow, Juliana Aldous, made it back to the gang base, in which, well, we'll eventually work on stuff from there on the days in which we run the game. But as it is World Building Wednesday, let us build some worlds. We are trying to focus less on rambling about the lore and more on focusing on the actual world building, making progress and all that. So, when last we left off, we had decided we would work on the frontier sector. And then we rambled the rest of the time, but we decided we'd work on the frontier sector, even though it's not anywhere near where Juliana Aldous is. Just for reference, I'm sure I've done this before. Wrong variant of the map. This is the one we're looking for. For reference, the character we follow on our solo campaign is over here in the Terran nations, while we will be world building outside of civilized space, off over here specifically, which we used to have a character here in some of our far earlier solo streams. But we will be working on the frontier because it is important to galactic society and the like, and has more freedom in working on, well, whatever we want to work on in our world building. Of course, we do have a lot of freedom in world building anywhere, really, as long as we don't change things that are. Because, of course, we are restricted by the law, as one should be when world building. I mean, slightly off topic, but very much on topic for world building. If you world build and you have a preset thing that you're world building on, it is not ideal to break rules or change rules without, well, it's just not good to, if you are going to at least consider all the consequences and so forth of that. But it is not ideal to randomly break rules or switch things, or it is good to have a base foundation that you build upon when world building. For instance, as I often probably have said, magic and casting in our universe of Galactic Requiem has a baseline rule that you cannot magically affect or psionically affect or divinely affect any form of effect directly electronic devices. This is a basically hard rule. Electronic energy fields, not just devices, it depends on the power of the energy field, messes with casting. So you could cast Fireball on a computer and it would work, but you couldn't mechanically affect, not mechanically, electronically affect the computer using casting due to the energy it has innately in it. To certain degrees, it's a bit complex, but a better term of this that's far less complex to explain is FTL lanes. FTL must be done on lanes, as I'm sure I've said a lot, which is what this web of blue lines connecting everything is. If you don't use an FTL lane, there's a significant chance of FTL failure, etc., etc. These are basically rules we follow. Same with FTL speeds, etc., etc. There are baseline rules and ways things work. Breaking these is not ideal. You wish to, well, it's just better if you stick to baseline rules because it makes everything understandable. And then if you're going to break them, be very specific about it. Don't just change everything. Otherwise, you will cause problems in your own world building. There are various examples in Elysian media of this happening, of long-running franchises just deciding to change rules of how they work or base things or have inconsistencies in the way they work. And, well, this causes problems in their settings and so forth and all sorts of stuff like that. Here we are. Sorry about that. Here we go. So let's get down to business. We have, of course, the Sacred Grove sector. We know a little bit about it. We last time on World Building Wednesday, I'm pretty sure it was last time, we went over the different spheres of influence and what they mean. And we talked about the fact that different sections can have different societies, well, little groups within them, despite the fact that it is all technically under the control of Sacred Grove. Well, everything within the sphere. Their influence does, of course, proceed beyond, as we explained. It proceeds even to the sectors that are over here. Of course, we map sector by sector. So, of course, there are sectors here, here, in the diagonal, sectors all around it. And their influence goes over to those sectors. They're a Dyson swarm, one of the few in the area, so their influence is vast. But they are far more broken up. What's the word for that? They're not as unified as most Dyson swarms in the core worlds. So, let us bring up our file. You'll have to give me one moment while I find our file for the system. Here we are. Okay. And of course, we have our editing file, which is our usual file, which we will use to write down anything of major note. There are a few things I should explain. I don't think I've explained them. Maybe I did. But just for... I mean, why not? We'll go over this. Is it written here? Sort of. So, the core system in Sacred Grove, the core world, the main Dyson swarm. I say world, it's a core system. The main Dyson swarm and the core system is... So I have to keep switching between files. Here we are. There are basically 10 major items in the system of Sacred Grove. Here we are. Those 10 major items. Of course, we have a better understanding of the core system because we've had several campaigns that take place there. The 10 major objects are the designated Dyson Swarm sections, being the core Dyson Swarm, the Trade Hub and Industrial section of the Dyson Swarm, the Military District of the Dyson Swarm, a Ice Giant, which is Object 4, with orbital asteroids, 6 moons, all colonized, and industrial stations. The fifth object being a terrain-biased planet, which means Earth-like. Heavy cloud cover and vast orbital stations. Object 6 is another terrain-biased planet. 2 rings, a dual ring system. 10 moons, all colonized. It contains exotic materials and has orbital stations. Object 7 is a gas giant with a colony station, a gas giant with colony stations. Object 8 is 6 moons, all colonized, and industrial stations. Object 9 is an asteroid field with orbital industry and colony stations. And Object 10 is a gas giant with 16 colonized moons and more colony stations. Of course, the Dyson Swarm extends far beyond Object 10. There are stations everywhere. Of course, this system's designation, if you want to know coordinates-wise, subsector 65, subsector location 115. You can see by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And, of course, 1, 15. Which indicates, of course, the coordinates of the system. Of course, if we're talking galactic coordinates, I believe the galactic coordinates of this frontier sector are south 308, west 253. If you wanted to get here from the Council core. Not that you could. You'd have to take the gate because there's no known connective line from here to there, which could be an interesting campaign. Of course, I mean, there could be all sorts of things in that campaign. An interesting campaign would be a expedition force sent to connect here to the civilized space via standard FTL routes, which might involve making FTL routes or mapping FTL routes, depending on whether FTL routes connect it. I actually don't know. Because, well, we have been over the fact that there are, last time we went over the fact how many mapped systems there are and how we map only is really necessary, etc., and how there are quite a few mapped areas, but there's like a few, very few fully mapped ones, and none of them, none of the fully mapped, and we have nowhere near, basically, even with all the mapping we have done, we don't have anything that is between, not anything, of course, what I mean is we don't have, a full-on connection of sectors between here and there. I mean, look at how many sectors that is. If you're going just in a straight line, which is likely, I mean, given that the entire sectors, it's theoretically possible. 434 sectors. Let's do a little bit of math. 434. Of course, we're diagonal, which would increase numbers due to way distances are calculated, whatever. But just a rough estimate, 150 light years per sector, we're looking at 65,100 light years between here and there. In a direct, closest line, you're looking at 65,100 light years. So, a ways away. Which, if you're going at a standard 1 times FTL drive, which is like military tier, standard military tier, of course not imperial military tier, but standard military tier, you're looking at 65,100 hours. Or about 2,712 days, or about 7.4 years to get from there to here in a direct line. Is that even right? I feel like I did the math wrong there somewhere. A light year an hour is correct, right? Give me 1 second before I look. I need to find the answer to this, or I will go insane. Of course, um, while I have basically made all of the law and all of the rules and all the everything, I don't remember it all off the top of my head, admittedly, especially when it comes down to math equations of the exact speeds of Starship drives, which is why we have files. When you write something so big, you check files. Like I said, consistency is key. And I like making sure the information I give is accurate. Here we are, FTL drives, standard is ×1, but what's that mean? Yes, okay, good. It is an hour. It is a one times drive is 1 light year an hour, and that's a top line and or standard military drive for civilized space. Of course, the Empire has times 0.01 drives, while, you know, a civilian vessel likely has ×3 drives. Of course, there are even slower drives. The slowest standard drive. I mean, of course, there are even slower than I'm about to mention. Is even, non-FTL, of course, there's slower than light travel. But the base lowest drive, which is considered an, outdated, archaic drive, is ×384, which is 1 light year every 16 days. Like I said, of course, there are slower, but you're not likely to find slower in civilized space. It is so easy to achieve at least ×384 for a drive. Well, like I said, throughout civilized space, you're likely to see. I mean, you can even find type ×12, or even ×24. A lot of drives out in the frontier are actually ×24, ×48, and even ×96 out in the frontier, like where we're working on. Drives can get that slow. But you're not likely to find. I mean, it's possible. It's basically you're not going to find slower than ×384 FTL drives. It's possible, not likely. Because I mean, just the way it works is if you have FTL, if you achieve FTL, if you're in civilized space, let's say you're a nation in near civilized space that achieves FTL, you're likely going to be able to figure out what everybody else is doing. It's not really hidden. Anybody can buy a starship for the most part. So it's not really hidden. And your engineers are probably going to be able to get your drives to the standard tiers of like ×12 at the worst if you're in civilized space but just achieved FTL. You're probably going to have at worst ×12, more than likely. Now, if you're nowhere near civilization, you basically are getting into FTL for the first time, you can probably tune your drive to that lowest of ×384, as mentioned. So, it's not like they don't exist. And it's not like slower doesn't exist, but that's like, I mean, that's just where it goes. I mean, of course, the way FTL works is I have a chart in front of me. Of course, I don't think you can, yeah, the chart's not visible to you. I can make it visible, I suppose. Sorry, I'm trying to make the chart visible here, which will take just a moment. We will, of course, need to open our editor. Let's open the big sheet so it's more visible. We're going to delete the chart minutes after we place it because it would just clutter up the sheet. I just want to make it so at least you can, you know, see what I'm talking about for the most part. Oh, formatting. Let's make it standard size, I suppose. Maybe not. It's been a while since I worked with this program. There we go. That's better. Okay, so as you can see here, it's our base FTL chart. These are just the bases. It's not like we can't do something that's not on the chart. Doing anything that's not on the chart is easy. We just, input the number. The way it's used is FTL multiply, input the number, calculate, find result, etc., etc. For instance, you can see here times hour equals number, and so forth. This is just a quick handy chart for basically going, okay, we've traveled 1 light year with this, so I don't need to travel, I don't need to do the math of 384 hours equals, it's basically just a handy chart for going 16 days per light year. Instead of having to do the hours to days calculation, it's just an easy, handy chart for doing it. Of course, we can, you can, it's not like you can't have a times 7 FTL drive, you can. You could theoretically even have a times 2 point something, I suppose. Please don't. Please don't. I don't I don't want to do the math on that. But you could have like a times 6.3 FTL drive if you hate your GM. It's possible. But yeah, you can have any number of times drive. This is just used for easy calculation. You can even run slower. It's just not likely. This chart is also used for, these numbers here are used for purchasing an FTL drive. This chart is actually used for finding the prices if you want to put an FTL drive in a ship using our ship construction rules. Basically, pricing is based on this chart loosely for the pricing of your FTL drive. Of course, the chart doesn't go all the way, but basically the way the chart works is, I'd have to bring up the chart, but I'm not going to do that right now, but basically the way the chart works is there is a base FTL based on where you are. For instance, like I mentioned, in the frontier, the base is like times 24 times 48. I forget exactly which one, I have to double check. But basically, you have your base. And when buying, let's say you were in civilized base, the base is basically times 2 times 3. Based on where you are, let's say it's times 3. So the base pricing chart has tiers. So, of course, a tier up, this would be a certain price in your starship. A tier up increases that price up to a certain number, and tier down decreases the price up to a certain number. And those are the bases of what's available in the thing. Of course, you could like get worse, but the pricing chart goes only a few steps up and down from the base price. So in civilized space, let's say it's times 3, it might go a couple of steps down to here for pricing and a couple of steps up to here for pricing, all based on the base price. So of course, if you're somewhere lower, it's used for calculating base prices and the like. Hello. Made a slight error there. Hit the wrong button. There. That's the right button. Sorry about that. So basically, yeah. It's basically just used for pricing and quick calculation. But of course, an FTL drive can't literally have basically any number, technically speaking. You know, if you need it to, but of course that just means more math for your GM. Anyway, but basically that's pricing of that. So yeah, with a standard civilized drive, we are looking at like 7.4 years if going in a straight line, which I suppose, I mean, that's not even entirely true. Technically, you could take a gate. Well, of course, as mentioned, there's a gate here that leads to there using an ancient gate, a jump gate specifically. But even if you wanted to go directly, you could. I don't know exactly where the shortest line along the south is, but you could take a quick gate technically out to like the edge, which would cut off several hundred light years from your trip. Probably over 200 no, over 2000. Over 2000 light years from your trip. I'm not going to do the math on that, but yeah, basically would cut some time off your trip. But yeah, that could be an interesting campaign. A sort of expedition out there, either mapping out lanes to get there or generating lanes using FTL generators, which would have to be funded even more than a other type of mission. But that would be quite a thing. Anyway, here we are. So, world building. I suppose let's get back to the proper map. So, basically, oh yeah, I was doing a thing here. Of course, I mean, we also have a little bit of lore, a little bit of lore on each of the things. At least in this file, I must admit, I am not the best at note taking. I'm trying to get better at it, but often when I take notes, they are scattered between so many different files, mostly because, as I said, I run Galactic Requiem a lot for a lot of different groups and a lot of different campaigns and a lot of different, even with one group, multiple different campaigns and so forth. So basically, so many characters, and often I'll take notes in that character's file, well, in that campaign's file, either that character's file or that campaign's file. And so while I have in front of me the file entitled Sacred Grove, basically giving all the information on Sacred Grove, it only contains things that were put down there when working on that section, and not any of the smaller bits of lore from campaigns. For instance, in this file, it doesn't state specifically that, of course, my personal forces have a foothold in the system. That would be in the file that is for Eshadon, which is one of our previous characters, unarchived unfortunately, from our previous solo campaign streams. He was in the Sacred Grove system. So, of course, literally a lot of stuff from that was gathered in that is in that file. Some of it's in our campaign file here. And then there's, for instance, the Jackal owns a station here. My personal forces have a few stations. Jackal's a crime lord. Part of several campaigns, actually. Let's see. There's also the Butcher's Forces. Anyway, unimportant. Point is, should take better notes in organizing them. Here we are. System, etc., etc. Well, I suppose I'll read it out proper. System subsector 65, sector location 115, locally known as Sacred Grove, is one of the future neutral systems in the southern galactic frontier that is both developed as a major nation. Wait, slow down when reading, yes. Southern galactic frontier that is both as developed as a major nation core system and has a jump gate that links it to the main jump gate network of civilized space. Object 1 being the Dyson swarm of countless stations that house the majority of the system's inhabitants. This just explains. I mean, do we want to read it all out? I suppose we can. Countless stations that house the majority of systems inhabitants. The industrial output of these stations cover most standard goods used by the system's population, and trade between various stations in the swarm is plentiful. Many of the stations in this swarm have various purposes and even different environments. Object 2. A Dyson swarm of countless stations house the majority of the system's intergalactic trade and production of all sorts of specialized and general goods, items, vehicles, and ships. These stations constantly trade vast quantities of goods between them, and freighters are always arriving, leaving, and traveling between stations. Object 3. A Dyson swarm of countless stations that house the majority of government, military, and security in the system. Military bases, shipyards, government stations, and colonies, and standard, you know, populated stations fill this swarm of stations. Government security ships constantly launch from these stations to aid the various other local security forces in the system, because, as you know, this is noted in here, but as I've mentioned before, they are not a unified, very unified uh, nation of even in like they're not really unified, so they have a big military section and government section that tries to monitor and control all these other forces in their own system, which they have to basically constantly do by because each one basically has their own military, and it's too late to rein that in. It's not like the core Sacred Grove government, which is more a sort of alliance than anything, can really rein in the various stations at this point. If they did it at the start, maybe they could have, but at this point they couldn't without a major war. And that's not something they can really afford. So they just have to keep a huge security force around. Military vessels arrive and leave from here to other systems in order to watch trade lanes and keep order in as much of the local area of the sector as they can. So this is everything I've read out here of the first objects is a good example of what I mentioned before about world building, of just having a paragraph of information can provide so much, provide so many opportunities to build on things, provide ideas, and gives you just a bit of nice information. If you're world building for a story, you could, I mean, it's mostly just for your benefit if you're world building for a story, unless you're building a world book, which, explains all this stuff, because you don't really want to, like, exposit that in story writing just out there. You want to have it flow in and so forth. However, if you're running a tabletop RPG, that is information you could give people if you're setting a scene. Or let's say a player says, I want information about the sector. Okay, roll me a knowledge check. Or does the character know about it innately? If they do, then you can tell them. If they don't, roll me a knowledge check or research check about the thing. If they roll their research check, give them some bit of information on that. Building world stuff. But, let's see. Is it even not noted here? Well, that's annoying. It's in one of the other files. So, Object 10 it was either Object 8 or 10. One of the outer gas giants, I think it's Object 10. I have the wrong file open and I don't know where the right file is, unfortunately. So, in the outer system, one of the gas giants is heavily run by corporations, and there is currently a slight war going on between them. Not between the, I mean, there's constantly wars going on in the system. It's not unified at all whatsoever. But, and there's, there's my forces here that are also engaged in a war with the system. But there's a small conflict going on between several outer stations and the corporations. They're currently having a bit of a war between outer. I think it was. I don't have the right file open. It was like the outer independent systems, outer independent stations. Maybe outer independent stations. Yeah, there might be more to that name, but like there's the outer independent stations, a section of outer stations, of course, that is currently at war with one of the corporations, and they've been having a bit of a conflict out there. Anyway, that's just some things that are going on in the call. So, well, we've rambled quite enough. Let's get to actual world building. We need to add to this stuff. Of course, we are in a bit of trouble because I don't have all the information in the right place, which I will do not here, not right now, but I'll gather the information from as many files as I can remember that I have it in, and put it all in one consolidated file. Like I said, not the best at organization, because a lot of that's in the different campaign files. I thought that bit that I just mentioned about the outer stations being at war with the some of the corporations was in the main file, but apparently not. It was in one of the additional files. I should really compile it all into one place. Anyway, let's see here. So, of course, we need to map this place out more, which I suppose we could do. Some of. We also need to decide some things about it, which I suppose we'll do that. Let us open on editing file. Here we are. This is my exact point. The file I was looking at does not have this stuff in it. Yes. There are alliances and groups within those worlds that act somewhat independently. Major corporations in the capital Dyson swarm. We're just making notes of things to remember here, basically. Have influence. Many have the influence over many of the dealings of Sacred Grove and its area of influence. Of course, this is just a rough one. Writing normally, I would not approve of this. because we have influence twice, but long time ago, I learned that when taking notes and so forth, it is better to get your notes and words and so forth onto the page rather than correctly on your rough draft or so. It's better to just get it down so you don't stop and lose track of what you're doing or lose momentum in working. It's better to get the information down and then refine it later. So the corporations have major influence. Hmm. I'm sorry. I'm a bit. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm still split. I've said it before here. I'm split between wanting to work on world building Sacred Grove and the frontier and all that, and wanting to work on our solo campaign, of course. I'm just constantly split between those two things because world building. I mean, we could solve that, but I mean, not really. But hmm, let's see. Sorry, just basically what happened there was ideas for the solo campaign. Of course, it's run somewhat by a bot. By somewhat, I mean we of course have a series of charts. I say bot. It's a series of charts. Let's call it a GM AI call, but it's not really an AI or anything. It's just a series of charts that are referenced, and it's a long list of charts, a long list that basically generate anything up to interpretation. Basically, we've been over it before. It basically allows us to give us symbols or words or events and so forth that we interpret into a campaign, thus not needing a GM. Of course, normally for my players, I GM, but when we solo, we can't GM solo. I mean, we could, but unbiased and not knowing what's going on, we use a bot. So that way we don't have much knowledge of what's going to occur, and we can't, it makes it so you can GM, well, you can play solo without, knowing what's going on. Of course, given the fact that the world has laws and rules, we know the rough stats of things and so forth. But basically, I'm going off topic. But I mean, at this point, if you don't expect that, then yeah, um, basically, um, hmm, admittedly, we've been a bit sporadic in our streams, and I've been a bit unprepared. But that's because, I mean, admittedly, a few games came out recently, some Elysian games, and I've been playing those. Playing some of those new Elysian releases like Starfield and that new Cyberpunk expansion released the other day, and doing some Armor ops, Armor 3, you know? And so I've been a bit distracted and not really prepared in. I like preparing and setting up before, so I have an idea, so I don't ramble, but Um, let's see. So let's make an outline. Let's make an outline. We can always use more knowledge on Sacred Grove. We can also work on. We've decided that we're going to world build Sacred Grove. We can't go back on that now. I mean, we could, but we're not going to go back on that now. Hmm. contemplating going back on that. Um, Mostly because, like I said, I keep thinking about our solo campaign and so forth. So, let's see. It's just easier if I have, how do I put it? It is just easier if I have a plan or an idea or a place to start, you know? It's, admittedly, it's, it's a bit overwhelming, if you know what I mean. It is a sector with a Dyson swarm. There is so much to work on in a sector with a Dyson swarm. There are countless corporations, organizations, groups, nations, subdivisions, etc., etc. We could world build infinitely in this one area. We could. It's a Dyson swarm and a sector of 150 by 150 light years with approximately 1,500 to 500 systems, each system containing 0 to 20 objects. There are countless things to work on in a sector. There are genuinely countless things to work on in a sector. And just looking at this, what's happening here? I'm like, okay, we'll build this sector. Then I go, okay, what do we work on? Because normally, admittedly, when I'm world building a thing, I will have a goal or an idea or a thing that I'm doing, if you know what I mean. Much as how we talked about before, map only is really necessary, which is a great saying from a traveler. World building a sector, an entire sector, especially one as big as this, it's easier to world build a planet even. But even then, what are we world building? Why are we world building? Of course we world build because we love world building, but I need a groundwork. It is easy to say such bold statements like Sacred Grove influences the systems around it and the sectors around it. It's easy to say Sacred Grove has these rings of influence in its own sector. It's easy to say the Dyson Swarm is broken up amongst, not, destroyed, but different factions and so forth and isn't unified. These are easy statements when world building. And generally, they're a good place of what you need. Getting any more detail, we need an idea, much as how the statement map only is really necessary exists. Is it necessary to world build all these minor corporations as like right here? As I said when designing, a lot before, I said when designing guns or vehicles or literally anything, adding a paragraph of information about it, it's easy. It's fine. It's fun. It's easy. It's good world building. Adding a paragraph of data to a weapon when I design it stats wise and so forth. But just out of the blue, doing so, I have no ground to stand on, if you know what I mean. We have an entire sector, an entire system, entire Dyson swarm to work with. Do I mean, it depends on your mood, I suppose. We could define the local currencies. We could. We could define this. We could define that. There's a lot we can do. But without a groundwork, how would I put it? I keep dodging around the topic, I suppose. At least it feels like that to me. It's easier for me to world build when I'm doing my writing because I have a story. You know, our character's going to go here. This is the plot of the story. Here's what's important. And even if it's not directly related to the story, I have an idea of what I want to world build around it. Now, if I'm running a campaign, I have an idea of where the players are, what they might interact with, stuff like that. Where they're going, what they're doing, what they might choose to do. Here's some plot hooks. Here's some world building for those plot hooks. There are things to build on, things that are necessary to work on, which is easier to expand world building from there. Of course, we could here, working on the frontier of Sacred Grove, we could throw things at the file. We could throw bits of information in. Here's, like I said, here's the currency. Here's a faction. Here's another thing. Here's a type of weapon. Here's a producer of starships. We can throw all this in there, but it feels scattered. Of course, we could zoom in on a topic. Here's a starship manufacturer. Here's what they build. Here's their ties. Here's the connections. But deep, deep in my mind, I ask, why? Not why, I mean, of course, because world building is fun and so forth. But because world building is fun, and I like world building, but a little part of me says that's not productive. World building for fun is fun, and getting data down is important when world building, but also I like being productive when I world build. And by that I mean that is all nice information, and it can be useful, but I also feel like we should world build things that are relevant to something. I mean, I run so many campaigns and so forth that I feel we should world build something relatively relevant. So, yeah. I mean, it's all good. It's all good to get down. You know what I mean? It's all good. Any bit of world building we get down is good. But it feels sometimes that some world building is more valuable than other world building. For instance, while it is nice lore-wise, let me put it this way, it's nice lore-wise to know that this system, particularly this system, a world in this system produces a type of assault rifle locally, using local resources, untied with, they produce their own variant of an assault rifle. That's nice information to know. That's nice information to know. And that's world building. And they specifically have ties with an asteroid mining organization that has ties with this entire area. See, that's all world building information that's nice to know. Who's going there? Who's going there in particular? Who's going to go there and buy that assault rifle? Do any stories take place there? Do any short stories or novels that I write take place there? No. Do I plan on any to take place there? No. Are any players going to go to that specific system and deal with that mining group or buy guns there? Probably not. Let me put it this way. Let's do this. Where was that again? I mean, I remember where it is, but oh, where in the system was that again? You intend to go specifically there, player? You intend to go there specifically? Where'd you wish to go? You wanted to buy a what? From where? Why not here? You're here, right? You want to go here? That's days travel. Why? Why do you want to go there? You have missions and quests up here where you are. Like you see, it's all good world building, but some world building feels more valuable than other bits when you're doing this the way we do, writing stories and running campaigns and so forth. Of course, with our eventual goals, of building an infinite living universe. I say infinite, I mean, one galaxy is more than enough. Of course, there are more than one galaxy in Galactic Requiem, but one galaxy is more than enough. You see, the point is, of course, in the end, with our end goal, yes, that is information we need. It's information we want. In the end goal, it is valuable. But it feels worthless to work on something like that. You know what I mean? Because nobody's going there. No campaign takes place there. No story I'm writing takes place there. It feels less valuable to work on that. At least currently. Now, if a campaign takes place there or players go there, then we work on it. Map only is really necessary. Which is why I'm pretty sure I am I've convinced myself to work on world building our solo campaign. We will world build, I mean, it still is probably just as worthless. It is probably just as worthless, but we will, I suppose, world build. We can always do bits here, but we'll focus our world building effort around our character. That way, it's just better. It just feels more valuable. Even if it isn't any more valuable than that, it just feels more valuable. So we'll do that. Which, you know, so just looking for the right section. Here we are. So last time our character made it back here. I'm pretty sure we have a bit of information that is relevant, which is yes, the local gang. We actually had a stat sheet for the local gang. I'm pretty sure I did the stats right. Maybe, maybe not. Yeah, it's good enough. So we have a stat sheet for our local gang, basically. That's this group that our character is intending to work with. Let's let's write a paragraph. Let us write a paragraph. The local Gangs HQ is in the underground section of an old multi-level arcology. To the south is let me make sure I'm getting this right. Okay, so it is different. It's not, what I mean is it's not different, but it should be. So, just making sure. To their direct south, across a set of train tracks is a underground market. Well, it's not an underground market. It's a physically below the ground market, you know? Let's see. Is a market. We should also note that, is that a kilometer? Let's check. So here, every square is 50 feet. That is multiple kilometers. Probably. Let's double check. One 1640. Yep, 5 kilometers, yes. Okay. 5 5 kilometers to the east is this is just a scattered note. It's a gang that operates out of an old abandoned zoo. That's where our, little adventure took place. Here we are. Okay. Hmm. There is I'm not too sure about this one. This one's just an idea. There is a separation between above ground and there's a difference between the above ground and the subsurface gangs in territory. Why not? We'll throw that idea around. We'll note that this one's an idea and not a sure thing by giving it its own marking. When world building, feel free to throw ideas in and out, you know? Sometimes you got to consider things. Maybe it's a good idea, maybe it's not, but, you know, mark it down, consider it, see if it provides anything, you know? Just throwing ideas out there. Let's see. So we have a block of 3 arcologies, basically. We have a small gang that our character is working with. We have an arcology here, an arcology here. There theoretically are multiple gangs in each arcology. It is possible. One second, now I'm curious. How large is this? 540 feet? So about 164 meters. 164 by 164, and several stories tall. For a comparison, lengthwise across the street, this arcology block at 164 meters classifies, not in its height, it's much higher than it is across, but in its length, it technically classifies as, if I can not lose the sheet, here we are. Have to scroll a long way. We're looking at the Starship rulebook. 160. Means that this classifies as a, you could fit a frigate lengthwise, you could fit a, like, frigate all the way across, let alone height. Well, depending on the frigate class, to be fair. Stats-wise, a frigate can range from 100 to 250 meters. And given that there's 150, it falls within frigate class. Obviously, if you account for the multiple stories of this tall building, it is larger than a frigate. Because a frigate is at most, you know, several decks tall, but nowhere near as much as this tower of an arcology. Which means it might mass in as a destroyer or even cruiser. I'd have to do the math on that. But it might mass in as a destroyer or cruiser. Let's see. One second. So, we know that much. We also have the base stats of the local gang, which is just 100 people. Our goals will be to expand it, as it will be the main group our characters are working with while on their mission. For those of you who don't remember, because it hasn't really come up, our character's mission Yelena Aldis. Her goal is to retrieve a individual that has crashed here, that is from a, well, it's a enemy government official. This planet's currently at war. She's currently behind enemy lines. Well, she's not part of the government, technically. She's part of a mercenary force behind enemy lines to try and retrieve this crashed target. And yes, that is her goal. And we intend to keep her here for a while as she goes about her business and interacts with the world. Let's see. Um, we require. What do we require? This was the gang's territory. We do need to remap that section. This section's fine. Well, it needs a little bit of remapping because it's the underground variant of this. And the buildings do go continually downward, multiple stories. Um, yes. Let us check one set of notes real fast. Here we are. Interact. Bring up this. Go to Juliana Aldis's sheet. Zoom out. Just so we can see everything. Here we are. Zoom back in. Okay, so there is the local gang. They offered money for the target. There was a standoff. We know that the target was taken. There was sort of a standoff. The target was taken somewhere else. So theoretically, at some point, we're gonna have to generate another turning point for our solo campaign. We will unfortunately call it here, a bit significantly shorter than usual. Here's what we'll do. We'll call it here. Next time, which is Friday, ideally, we will run the solo campaign, generate the turning point, and progress the campaign. From there, once we get back into the swing of the campaign, after that session, we'll know what needs to be done. After we know what needs to be done, because it's bot run, I don't actually know what we'll be doing. Once we generate that, next World Building Wednesday, we'll build around that with world building. We'll not only work on the campaign, but we'll world build along with working on it, which will get us back into the swing of things. Yes, that is our plan. I will try to play a game on Sunday, a video game on our Sunday stream. I will try, if we do. I do other stuff on Sunday, so Sunday recently been missing, but Sunday might be on and off spotty. It depends. But yes, we will be here on Friday to run the solo campaign, get back into the swing of it, and that will give us an idea of what to world build here. Okay, and we'll try and be more on track from here on out. Thank you for stopping by. My apologies for the shorter stream. My apologies for the rambling. We'll try and rein that in and be more on track with everything. Thank you all.